Hello and welcome to a presentation on China's one-child policy. The concept of today's policy lesson is to understand how government policies can affect the population of a country. Let's first off look at China's population itself. This is a graph of population growth in China. You can see from the graph that in 1953 they had a population which was growing very, very rapidly. And they introduced a policy which was designed to actually increase it to grow more. Their president at the time wanted significant growth in their population in order to support the country for the future. By 1979, they realised that this growth was getting out of control and therefore they needed to do something about it. And so they introduced the one-child policy. Now, one of the biggest misconceptions about the one-child policy is that the population of the country went down. This is not the case. The significant thing about it is the rate of population growth slowed, eventually to a point where it actually slowed down very steadily and then has recently begun to pick up again to around, by 2012, it's around 1.3, 1.4 billion people. So the question is what were they doing? Well, you need to understand a range of things. You need to understand what the policy is. You need to understand whether there's any exceptions to the rule, why the policy was introduced, and then what was good about it and what was bad about it. Basically, what did they do to try and promote it and what did they do to try and stop promoting it? So, if we consider this slide, well, what is it? Well, it was a policy introduced in 1979 to slow the policy down. They enforced it incredibly strictly, okay? They delayed marriages. For a man it was 22, for a woman it was 20. They were encouraging fewer but healthier births, and they were trying to actually ensure that their population was controlled. Okay, there were some exceptions to it. If you lived in rural areas, you were allowed to have 2 children, assuming the first one was a girl. And if you are born under the policy, you are now actually allowed to have 2 children. And one of the third thing was, if your first child was born, was handicapped in any way or died, you were allowed a second policy. Okay, it has been estimated that the population growth was reduced by around 300 million. That's not to say it went down, but it was just the growth was slowed. So, how did they do it? Well, the key thing is there were significant positives to it and significant negatives to it as well. Okay, the positives were quite simple. They looked after the child. They gave your child a higher standard of education. They increased the role of both parents in the workplace, so they gave the parents better prospects for the future. They provided support with other birth controls. They ensured that that child remained healthy. Okay, they looked after it. They also gave significant benefits through care and attention in the workplace. Now, if you disobeyed it and had a second child, there were consequences. First off, anything you'd paid for the first child got removed. Okay. Secondly, all your later children couldn't be registered. That meant they didn't have the right to education. And as a consequence of that, that led to some consequences. Okay, one of the negative things was, because the nature of the Chinese society, boys were preferred over girls, and so there was incidences of female infanticide where the female was killed. And as a consequence, China is one of the few countries in the world where the proportion of men is higher than the proportion of women. Now, there were also certain negative things which were done to actually ensure that the policy was carried through. One of the things which was carried out was that there were penalties if you were found breaking the policy. You were fined. Okay, you could be forced to pay livestock if you lived in the countryside. Also, there was instances where females who were pregnant were forced into abortions. There was also forced sterilisation as well. So there were some quite complex measures done to ensure that the policy remained the way it did. Okay, take a note of some of the specific facts on this slide. It could be useful to you later. So, we should now have an idea about what the policy is, any exceptions, why the policy is introduced, and the benefits and disadvantages. Now, the kind of questions you can get asked in an exam are the 6-mark questions. These are the ones which are going to be marked and checked for your spelling, punctuation and grammar. So here's an example of it. Using a named example, explain how the country has tried to control its population. Note, at this point in time, it doesn't say about China. China is the case study which we have chosen for you. So this is the country which you're going to use. So what you want to do is pause the video and answer the question. Okay, so if you've answered the question properly, this is the mark scheme for it to give you some ideas. A level 3 answer, which is going to be written in full sentences, is going to be explicit. There's going to be a range of points used with full explanations of the methods used to control, and it's going to be relevant to a specific country. So, for instance, one of the things which China has done to control its population, introduced the one-child policy. It has done positive things such as introducing increased benefits for children by giving opportunities in the workplace such as nursery care in order to look after the child whilst the parents go to work. However, one of the negative things is that women who became pregnant with a second child were forced into abortions and consequently were then sterilised. This led to less female choice within the country. So I'll give you an idea of some of the different things you can do. You need to make sure that you have at least 2, but aim for 3 ideas which are well explained. This gives you a range of specific and explained points. You must make sure you develop them, and most importantly of all, you must make sure they are relevant to a specific country. This means you must get in the specific details into your work. Okay, hope that helped, and we'll see you at the next session. Here's some questions here for you to think about if you want to carry on for the future.